So, what I want to point out to you here is that when we assess an ethical dilemma and are trying to decide whether the act was a good act or a bad act, we tend to look at three different areas of the decision-making process. Okay? When we decide whether an act is good or bad, we tend to look at three different areas here. 1, 2, and 3. And each of the great Western ethical philosophers values one particular area of that decision-making process over the others. So let's get an ethical dilemma in our mind here. And just for fun, let's make it the sort of classic Dick Cheney ethical dilemma of going quail hunting or duck hunting or whatever it is with your friend, and you've got your gun out, and you see a little rustling in the bushes, and you say, aha, and you fire, and oops, I just shot my friend. Okay? Friend is in the hospital. How many of you think that Dick Cheney, in that example, did something that was morally okay? How many of you feel like, he didn't do anything wrong? That's okay. Okay? How many of you feel like he did something wrong there? That was something that was a bad decision. All right? Very interesting. Think of that. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay, maybe it's a little bit of a half and half. Okay, so you can keep that idea in your mind as we go forward. I want to start here in the middle, okay, with Immanuel Kant, who is a German philosopher, mostly living in the 18th century. For Kant, what is important when you make an evaluation of a moral decision, what is important is one's intent. What am I intending to do with this action? Am I intending harm on my friend? Am I intending harm on this duck or this quail? Or am I just having a good time? That will help to determine whether I am making, or whether I have made the right choice. Okay? The only truly good thing, says Kant, is a good will. Okay? And by good will, we mean good intention. Goodwill toward men, as a Christmas carol or something like that. Okay? And what Kant says is, when you're deciding what to do, you consider a number of options. Do I pull the trigger? Do I not pull the trigger? Do I put the gun down and start dancing? Do I yell, hey, is there anybody out there, or is this actually a duck? Okay. I consider lots of different potential actions. And each one of these potential actions is called a maxim, according to ethical philosophers. Okay? A maxim is a potential action. So when Kant is trying to figure out whether or not you have a good intention, whether or not you have a good will, which is the only thing that's really important, he says the way to figure it out is to follow something called the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative. Categorical meaning in any circumstances, imperative meaning you ought to do this. And there are different formulations of the categorical imperative. I'm going to give you two that are really important. Number one formulation is universalize your maxim. What the hell does that mean? Universalize your maxim. Well, you know that a maxim is a potential action. Universalize means something kind of universal. Okay, what it means is, what would happen if everybody in this situation did what I'm contemplating doing? If everyone who was out duck hunting shot as soon as they saw a rustle, would that be okay? Let me give you another idea. I am very, very poor. I have 3 children who are starving. I walk into the grocery store, and I am considering whether or not to shove a few oranges in my pocket. Okay. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. You probably have an answer. Kant's answer is, what would happen if everybody who was poor walked into the grocery store and shoved oranges into their coat pocket? What would happen? Anybody? What happened? We'd run out of oranges. Oranges would be really expensive. We wouldn't have, we'd have security systems that would be very costly outside grocery stores. It would not be a good thing if everybody did that. So that means I individually should not do that. So that's one way of figuring out whether you have a positive intent. Another way of figuring out if you have positive intent, this is another formulation of the categorical imperative, is act in such a way that you treat humanity never as a means to an end, but always as an end withal. What does that mean? Use people. That means don't use people. Don't use them as a means to your own end. Okay? Hey Doris, buddy, we're good friends, right? Okay? You want to come over to my house and we can play a little, what do you like, the Nintendo Wii? Do you like, what do you want to do? I'm going to bake you a cake or something? Because we're best buds. You want to ride with me? I'll give you a ride to school. Hey, what'd you get for number 3 on the math homework? You just tell me? Okay, what am I just doing to her? I'm using her. I'm not really her friend. I'm using her as a means to an end. So even though she might really love the fact that now she's got a good friend, and all she has to do in order to keep that friend is give me the answer to number 3, I am using her. Okay. That's not somebody that I really, truly respect and treat as an end in herself. I'm only treating Doris as a means to an end. Don't use other people, says Kant. Okay. Set your watch to me is because people used to actually set their watch to this daily schedule because it was so regular, it was so routine. You can Vienna or something. Okay. Philosopher number 2 here, moving forward about 100 years in history to the 19th century. John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill is the principal proponent of a philosophy called utilitarianism. For a utilitarian, the only thing that matters when evaluating whether or not an action is good is the consequences of the action. What are the outcomes? Are they positive or are they not positive? So Dick Cheney thinks it's a duck and it turns out that it's his friend. For a utilitarian, is that a good act or a bad act? That's a bad act. Why? Because the consequences were wrong. Okay? The consequences were not good. So how do you figure out whether your consequences are good? You follow something called the greatest happiness principle. Act in such a way that your action promotes the greatest happiness for the greatest number. The greatest happiness for the greatest number. Now, it's important that we realize we're not talking about hedonism. Okay? We're not talking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll here, and whoever can get the most of it is the most ethical. He has a more sophisticated understanding of what brings you true happiness and true meaning. And actually, his friend Jeremy Bentham, this is a weird picture of him in his little wheelchair here, who's this very famous philosopher who had himself stuffed after he was dead, and he's sitting in a glass case in a university in London. Because I kid you not, Jeremy Bentham worked out a specific calculus for figuring out what actually promotes the greatest happiness. So strawberry ice cream, that gets you 2 units of happiness. But vanilla ice cream, that gives you 3 units of happiness. A good conversation with a friend, that's 5 units of happiness. You got this elaborate system for what counts and what doesn't count as happiness. Okay? Utilitarianism, we focus on the consequences. Greatest happiness for the greatest number. There's one other thing that Western philosophers focus on when trying to figure out whether an action is good or bad. They focus not on intent and not on consequences, but instead on the character of the person who is making the decision. Sometimes it's called virtue ethics. And the principal proponent of virtue ethics, of focusing on the character of the person, is Aristotle, great Greek philosopher Aristotle. Socrates teaches Plato, Plato teaches Aristotle, Aristotle teaches Alexander the Great, who goes on and conquers the Western world. Okay. Aristotle believes excellence is a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. And when Shaquille O'Neal maybe